Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I understand that we have participants from different parts of the world. So my presentation outline is as shown on the screen. I'll look at linking development and climate change, and also looking at the impact of extreme events on infrastructure, part of which has already been presented by previous speakers, Nicholas, Wilbert, and Lash. Also, I will look at the impact of sea level rise on coastal infrastructure. And more importantly, I will take you through some key highlights on the ways to climate resilient infrastructure, which again, previous speakers have touched on. Now, looking at the linking development and climate change, we have to acknowledge that the fast growing population developing countries, including Africa, and then of course, the same applies to Tanzania for that case, is posing increasing need for extensive physical infrastructure. And unfortunately, African countries, much as they are enhancing their infrastructure in order to provide a growing population with clean energy, water, and transport on a sustainable basis, they often fail to take into account the resulting climate risks, which are usually accompanied by high costs. I'm glad to hear that from Wilbert that is now being considered. But what we also see is that the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recognize the climate change and ensuring the resilience of infrastructure as two of the greatest challenges of our time. So therefore, climate change being one of the factors challenging the infrastructure resilience. So that's why it is reflected in the 2030 Agenda as an area that requires immediate interventions. So hence the continent is facing the potential of almost $183 billion liability to repair and maintain road damaged from temperature and the precipitation change directly related to predicted climate change through 2100. So that's you can really see. So next, please. Yeah, now looking at the impact of extreme events on infrastructure, as we have just mentioned, is that many of the projections indicate an increased intensity of extreme rainfall events in much of East Africa, including Tanzania, by the end of this century, as Wilbert and Lash have pointed out. And these are associated with high flood risks. So flooding events have major effects on key infrastructure, for example, through inundation leading to flood damage to physical infrastructure. And we have actually seen a number of illustrations from previous speakers. But also we see from river floods washing away and damaging infrastructure, as we have seen as well. And when this affects crucial infrastructure, each water treatment, electricity, etc., it has much greater risk to the local populations in terms of health risks and the facilities. And these increases in intensity would also increase the relative economic cost of periodical flood events. Next, please. Yeah, so in rural areas, just like in urban centers as well, roads represent a lifeline for economic and agricultural livelihoods. But also roads provide a number of indirect benefits, including access to healthcare, education, etc. Extreme events pose a costly hazard to roads in terms of degradation, necessary maintenance, and the potential decrease in lifespan. And hence, climate change poses costly impacts in terms of maintenance, repairs, and lost communication in those rural areas. And many of these impacts can be mitigated and avoided by proactive adaptation measures. It is therefore a crucial consideration for protecting current and future infrastructure investments and the socio-economic and economic, social, and other functions they serve. Unfortunately, future climate conditions are seldom considered in the planning of such infrastructure. So potential for increased flooding places food transportation infrastructure at high risk of damage in this respect, leading to high costs, post-harvesting losses. So those are some of the associated impacts. The same applies to the impact of sea level rise on coastal infrastructure. There is documented evidence that sea level rise increases in storm intensity and other extreme events will impact the infrastructure, particularly in tropical, small island states, and of course in the coastal regions as well. And the physical climate drivers and impacts of climate change include coastal infrastructure damage. The city and nearby coastal towns have many low-lying areas and include significant populations, and the infrastructure are therefore vulnerable to sea level rise. Sea level rise and extreme weather events disrupt transportation systems, production systems, infrastructure, public services such as water, education, health, and sanitation, especially in informal areas where much of the flooding take place and affect a good number of populations. And there is a lot of infrastructure illustrations on the presentations made by Lars, and you can really see what is happening on the ground. Next, please. Yeah, now talking about how do you go about it, and that is about pathways to climate resilient infrastructure. We are saying there is a need to enhance the resilience of existing infrastructure to a changing climate and to potentially more extreme weather events. And we have to look at it by taking into account the socio-economic cost of infrastructure failure, but also the need to build the resilience to droughts and the floods is therefore a key priority. So mainstreaming adaptation into infrastructure development can be achieved at low cost. Example for flood-prone roads in Mozambique. These are some of the examples where intervention has been made, but also integrating climate change consideration into infrastructure at the design stage is preferable from a cost and a feasibility perspective than trying to reconstruct or to put an infrastructure in place after it has been destroyed. And for this to be realized, effective weather and climate information services are crucial to better manage risks from climate variability and long-term changes in the climate services activities. I'm actually pleased to note that TMA has improved the services and early warning systems to be helping quite a lot. And I was also impressed to see that they have a lot of information that can be incorporated as part of at the initial designing stage, when designing such kind of infrastructure. But for this to be operational or to be implemented, they have to be backed by what we call policy frameworks to support mainstreaming climate process. Of course, having a policy in place, that's one thing, but also the compliance. I think that's a key, that those sectors that are responsible have to ensure that they comply with whatever guidelines that have been put in place, so that we actually we are saving the cost for the regular repairs, but also we ensure that whatever we put on the ground is climate proofed. Yeah, next please. Yeah, so however, there are challenges in conducting economic assessments for built infrastructure adaptation. I think this is one area that we need economists to come in, but also this is due to complicated uncertainties such as the accuracy of climate projections and the limited information regarding pathways for future economic growth and adaptation technologies. Hence, capacity enhancement in this area is required. Thank you very much.